Welcome, friends. I'm Dr. Chana Davis, a geneticist and science communicator. I'm thrilled to be here today to get nerdy with Dr. Malia Jones, co-founder of Dear Pandemic and former editor-in-chief. Malia is an infectious disease and social epidemiologist with an MPH and PhD in public health. When she's not volunteering as a nerdy girl, she's doing research at the University of Wisconsin-Madison and homeschooling her kids. And it turns out that homeschooling has some serious perks because Malia is joining us today from Provence, where her family has set up shop for a few weeks. So thank you so much for making this work, Malia.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I am excited to be here today, and we are quite the multinational team across.
Indeed.
What are we? 9 time zones in 2 countries, neither of which is the U.S.
That sounds about right. So before we jump into today's long list of questions, I want to remind you that we don't take questions cold. We get our questions from the inbox or question box on the Dear Pandemic website. So you can check it out there at dearpandemic.org if you want to submit a question for future discussions.
Yep, all right, we're going to tackle some of the popular ones today.
Yes, and we are branching out well beyond COVID. I think COVID is actually going to be underrepresented in today's conversation. So
yeah, I think so.
Let's get started with the virus that is number 1 in the news right now, monkeypox.
Yeah, monkeypox. So we have a question from Stacy,
Yes, Stacy in New York. She asked, can you address the new concerns regarding monkeypox? COVID was originally downplayed, and now look where we are. Will masking be ample to prevent transmission? Will they be starting to offer the smallpox vaccine to everyone soon? Thank you.
Yeah. So monkeypox is, it's really a very different kind of a virus than COVID-19. And I'll circle back to this point at the end, but it's really not considered high risk for pandemic. But there's a large outbreak in progress of monkeypox. Monkeypox is a close cousin of smallpox, but it's less severe and less easy to transmit compared to smallpox. And as I said, there's a big outbreak in progress right now. There are over 550 known cases, likely many more undetected cases out there across lots of countries, many of them in the high-income countries in Europe and the Americas, as well as Australia. And although so far the outbreak is concentrated among gay and bisexual men, that's probably just due to social factors. It's not considered a sexually transmitted infection. So monkeypox, as I said, it's much less transmissible than smallpox. It's also less transmissible than COVID. And generally speaking, it's not transmitted through respiratory droplets or the air at all. You would usually get it through direct, prolonged skin-to-skin contact with someone who has an active monkeypox rash. It usually resolves on its own in a couple of weeks in healthy adults. And that's mostly who's been involved in this outbreak so far. I think one of the interesting things with the monkeypox outbreak is that it really highlights the global inequality in infectious disease issues. There are countries in sub-Saharan Africa that have been dealing with monkeypox outbreaks that are much, much more severe than this one for decades on an annual basis. And in fact, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, monkeypox has affected more than 3,000 people this year so far. And, only now are most people in the West even hearing about it for the first time. So I think it is interesting that it does highlight those kinds of inequalities. The good news with this outbreak, monkeypox is not going to be the next pandemic. Twitter got all in a snit with me a couple weeks ago for making this claim there, but I stand by it. Monkeypox is not a new disease, and it's just not easy enough to transmit to become a pandemic. And in addition to that, there's a vaccine already. The smallpox vaccine works for monkeypox, and though you likely haven't had a smallpox vaccine if you're under about age 55, there is a newer vaccine that's already approved, ready to manufacture, and even stockpiled in some countries that prevents both smallpox and monkeypox. Some of that stockpile has even already been released to people who have high-risk contacts, who have had known contacts, or who are at high occupational risk for coming into contact with somebody in this outbreak. So in a nutshell, what to expect here, there are going to be a lot more cases of this before the outbreak is resolved. It might even become endemic in a lot of new places, but I don't think there's a future where everyone needs a smallpox or monkeypox vaccine, or where this is the next lockdown. It's just not that kind of virus with that kind of risk profile.
Well, that's reassuring. Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm going to put a link in here to some more information on the monkeypox outbreak, something I wrote last week for Dear Pandemic.
Great.
So we're going to go on to the this is actually our only COVID vaccine question this week. We got a question from Anne from Georgia, who says, she asked us, since a new vaccine is apparently already in the works for Omicron, why should we get a booster for existing COVID? Taking yet another vaccine on top of a booster is highly worrisome. So what is the latest on these variant-specific COVID vaccines? And do you think they're worth holding out for?
Well, my short answer is I don't think they're worth holding out for.
Oh no, Chana, you sound robotic again.
Oh no. Let me just unplug and replug my
Okay.
mic.
Chana and I were having problems with audio when we were getting ready for the live here, and hopefully this will be a quick fix to just unplug and plug our microphone back in again. And
okay, unplug back in. Is that any better?
No, it's not any better.
Oh man.
I know.
I'm hating this. Okay. Does anyone else hate computers? Raise your hand.
We've been troubleshooting this so much, and we just can't sort out the cause of it. Okay. While you're working on that, maybe I'll just skip ahead to one of these other questions.
This is, I think I hear myself better.
No, it still sounds bad.
Oh man, I sound great to myself. So what were you suggesting?
I was going to say, while you're thinking about that, maybe I'll just skip ahead to one of the speed round questions and talk for a little bit while you figure that out. So at the end, we had planned to do a speed round and answer a bunch of the more common questions out there. And I can tackle a couple of these really quick here. So one of the ones that we are getting all the time in the question box right now is Maureen in Wisconsin asked it this way. I was vaxxed and boosted in the fall, and then I got COVID. Should I wait for a second booster shot, and how long? So Maureen and everybody else who's asking this question, it is safe to get a booster shot as soon as you are no longer infectious after you've gotten COVID. You should get a booster because immunity from getting COVID really varies quite a bit from person to person. And there's just not a good way to know how much immunity you have. I asked nerdy girl, Dr. Ashley Ritter, this question. She's a clinician and nurse practitioner. And she said her advice to her own patients is to get it between 30 and 90 days out from having COVID, but to not wait longer than that because you really don't know how long your protection from that booster lasted. Hello? All right, let's check in. Oh, you sound great. Wonderful. Uh-oh, but she can't hear me. Oh my gosh, ridiculous. Can you hear me? Okay, I'm just going to keep talking while she...
Give it a second.
Sorry about the technical difficulties.
Okay, I sound good, but I can't hear you.
All right. Nancy in the chat is asking, can older people gather together outside if they are vaxxed and boosted? Yeah, the advice for gathering together outside really has not changed. Omicron is easier to get. It transmits more quickly.
Shall I just answer my question?
Hang on, I'm going to try it. You know what? We're going to pause the live. Oh, wait, maybe we shouldn't do that because it'll be hard to come back.
I'm not hearing Malia.
I'm just texting her to tell her what to do. All right. So Nancy wants to know, can elders who are 80 to 90 gather outside if they're vaxxed and boosted? Yeah, the advice has not really changed in terms of gathering outside. The Omicron variants are much more easy to transmit from person to person and can be transmitted faster, but outside is still really pretty good protection. There are a few cases where it seems like somebody really did get sick outside, but I would say if you're practicing, even decent social distancing and everybody is vaxxed and boosted, I think you're fairly safe to celebrate those important birthdays in an outdoor setting. And I know we're all looking forward to having a summer where hopefully cases are lower because we can have more outdoor activities. So while we're waiting for Chana to come back, I'm going to tackle some more of these questions in the speed round. And I don't know, if she can't come back, then maybe it'll just be me. Chana's back, but I don't know if she's going to be able to hear me. She cannot hear me. Okay, well, so Chana was going to ask me this one. What's going on with boosters and kids? Kids who are 5 to 11 finally got approved for boosters. Wouldn't you know, that happened the day my family and I left the country. We are going to get those boosters as soon as we return. I want to talk a little bit about what boosters mean in this context. I think in an ideal situation, the original the vaccine would have been designed so that we have one shot, and then several months later we have a booster shot, similar to the shingles vaccine, actually, and lots of the other vaccines. There wasn't time for that. We were in kind of an emergency situation, and so they tested a vaccine with only a 3-week interval between the initial shot and the secondary shot. Ultimately, I expect that interval to probably be extended. And so you can really think about this booster for kids who are ages 5 to 11, and actually for everyone, as the second part of a really important vaccine series. So yes, they're safe. Yes, they are very effective. In fact, much more effective than the original 2 vaccines. And yes, I definitely plan to get my 2 kids who are in this age group a booster as soon as we get back. We would have done it as soon as we could have if we had been in the country. All right, Chana still can't hear a word that I'm saying, and she's private messaging me that I can do all the talking. So I don't know. I guess I'm just going to keep talking for a little while until I get tired of it. Actually, I'm going to ask Chana this question. She can't hear us, but I'll text it to her. And then she can talk about this important question about the variant. So we got this question from Anne from Georgia. She wants to know, what's the point of getting a booster when a Omicron specific booster is coming? So what do you think, Chana?
So I'm not hearing Malia, but apparently you can hear me.
We can't hear you, Chana.
All right. This is kind of a game, but we'll just go with it. Variant specific boosters. So the short answer is that these are not worth holding out for. They do look promising, but at this point they don't seem transformative. There could be some modest benefit over the boosters that we have, but it's not going to be like a night and day, massive dramatic increase. And I think it's really important to point out that the boosters that we do have, which are developed against the original strains, are actually very highly effective in terms of the endpoints that matter most, which is hospitalizations and deaths. They're not doing an amazing job with preventing infection, but so there's a lot of room for improvement there. But they do serve the number one purpose that they're designed for. So just giving a little bit more information around this, I just wanted to explain a bit about what these actually are, because I think there's this belief that it's actually a cocktail of vaccines, sort of a 2-in-1, or it could even eventually be a 3-in-1 or more than that in one. And so what these are is they're a mixture of the mRNA from the original, encoding the spike protein from the original SARS version of the SARS-CoV-2 virus, plus mRNA encoding the spike protein from a variant. And so in the case of the Omicron variant, the mRNA would have 32 differences in the spike protein compared to the original one. So you're going to have, your body will receive the instructions to make the spike protein from the original, and it will receive the instructions to make the spike protein for the variant. And we don't actually have hard data on the performance of either of the Omicron vaccines from Pfizer or from Moderna, but they're both working on them. We don't have, I should say, hard human data. There's sort of been a number of animal studies and so on. We have preliminary data, but we're supposed to be getting the actual human performance data very soon, potentially this month. But I can say that it doesn't look super impressive based on what we've seen so far. And they did actually Moderna released clinical trial data from their beta variant specific cocktail, which they developed, earlier. So that's why we have those data first. And they released those data, and it found that participants had about double the antibody response, the neutralizing antibodies in particular, to not only the beta variant, but also Delta and Omicron. So double the antibody response. The question is, what does that really translate to clinically? We don't know. These are just immunogenicity studies. They don't actually have efficacy built into them. But just to give some context, twofold might sound like a lot, but the range in response from person to person is multiple hundredfold. So twofold is not really necessarily revolutionary and might not really translate to a huge difference in the body. Just using beta as an example to set expectations. So that's why my expectations are not really that they'll be transformative, even though we can't say that for sure yet. But both companies are saying that they should have something ready for the fall. But I think the value of being fully protected now is far greater than waiting for something that may or may not be, substantially better.
Actually help at all. Yeah, interesting. Okay, so we have a question. One reader asked us about what we can expect longer term. So what are your thoughts about what we're going to expect going forward from here? Chana still can't hear me. She has to read it in the chat.
Yes, there is a question about longer term and what we can expect. Will this be kind of an annual thing similar to the flu vaccine? My expectation is that because COVID doesn't seem to be going away anytime soon, that this will be a similar situation to the flu vaccine where we do see an annual iteration. And it's actually really exciting, I think, that the mRNA technology has had the opportunity through the pandemic to really mature. And I think the great thing about this platform is that you can actually go from knowing what the sequence of the variant to actually having a vaccine in a much shorter cycle time than you can with other platforms. So I think we'll actually be able to do a better job with COVID surges of having something that's closer to the actual variant that's circulating right now than we do with the flu, because the flu needs a lot more lead time because of the platform that they're using. So I think that's likely what's going to happen. And Pfizer, for example, said that they can make a new vaccine, and have it available in 100 days. And so the delay is really in terms of the regulatory process, that it needs to have some safety package submitted and reviewed and all of that. So, but from the company's perspective, they can get it done in a really short amount of time.
Cool. And I would also just add that I think a couple of exciting possible developments here with respect to the mRNA vaccines. That technology could actually make the flu vaccine more accurate because it could shorten that turnaround time. And there are a couple companies who are thinking about combining a flu and COVID vaccine into a single annual vaccine, which would be convenient. And we'll just see how that goes. So I don't know if Chana is going to be able to hear me to ask about the next question. We'll just see.
Can I ask you a question about Malia, or did you already introduce your own question? Okay, I'm just flying blind here. But yes, Malia, you did a wonderful post on shingles, which is another vaccine-related illness that deserves a lot of attention and has a really interesting story when it comes to the biology and the vaccines. So what can you tell us about shingles? And why don't you just jump right in? What do we need to know about shingles?
I will jump right in. I just have to say, though, this is really making me laugh. It reminds me of our earliest days with Dear Pandemic. Those of you who've been with us from the beginning will remember how ridiculously bad we were at doing the lives early on. And so these tech challenges are just making me They just make me nostalgic for the earliest days. So shingles, I'm a big nerd for viruses, and shingles is really an interesting one. It's caused by a virus, and it is vaccine preventable. It's actually caused by the chickenpox virus, varicella. And what happens is that when you get chickenpox, when you got chickenpox as a child, very likely, you had chickenpox, you felt crappy, and you had that itchy rash for a few days or a few weeks, and then it resolved. But the virus actually never really goes away. It goes into a dormant state and it hides from your immune system inside your own nerves. And later in life, when your immune system starts to decline, or when you've had a very stressful event or some other thing that suppresses, you can get shingles, which is a reemergence of the varicella virus along usually one of the neural pathways. And so this is why you usually get shingles just in one band or kind of a stripe pattern on part of your body. And that's the part of your body that is served by a single nerve that's being attacked by the shingles, by the virus that causes shingles. So who's at risk? Anyone and everyone who had chickenpox is at risk for shingles. And up until the 1990s, that really was just about everyone. Risk goes up as you age, but plenty of people get shingles before the benchmark age of 50, which is when the vaccine is recommended. It happens more often if you've been through something that really is very stressful or disrupts your immune system, like some kind of a stressful life event or another illness. There's a vaccine for shingles called Shingrix. This is a newish vaccine. There's an older vaccine for shingles that is no longer offered in the United States. And I'll return to that in just a second. But first, let's talk about Shingrix. Shingrix is a 2-dose vaccine that just contains a little part of the protein, the protein that your immune system is going to recognize. So it is not a live virus vaccine. The old vaccine, which is called Zostavax, was actually a live virus vaccine. And so it was not recommended for some populations who had suppressed immune systems. But people who have suppressed immune systems can and should get the Shingrix vaccine. Shingrix also works better than the old vaccine. You can get it even if you've already had shingles. You can and should get it even if you had the Zostavax vaccine, or if you were told you couldn't get a shingles vaccine back when it was that live virus vaccine. So there are a lot of people who should get the shingles vaccine that is available today. It's recommended for anyone over age 50. It's actually not covered by some insurance until a little bit older than that. So unfortunately, it can be kind of expensive. So some other important notes here. Let's see, what else? I covered all of those things. Okay, so we had some follow-up questions. I posted about this, and I will put the link to the post in the chat here. We had some follow-up questions after I posted this from readers, and I will just tackle those. So Robin from Eugene, Oregon asks, she says, I didn't have chickenpox as a child. She was born in 1954. I had some blood work done to see if this could be confirmed, and the lab results said inconclusive. If I didn't have chickenpox and I get Shingrix, is it a problem? No, it is not a problem. So many people made comments on this post about to the effect that they never had chickenpox. It was really surprising because truly almost everyone did have chickenpox. Even if you don't remember it or you never had symptoms of chickenpox, you could have still had it. 99 or more than 99% of us did have chickenpox until the varicella vaccine was introduced in the early 1990s. That's a childhood vaccine that prevents chickenpox infection. But if you are that 1 in 100 person, getting the Shingrix vaccine still will not hurt you. I didn't find any real good data on how well it will protect you, but it's not going to hurt. So next one, follow up from that, Chrissy from St. Louis, Missouri asked, what are the possible side effects of the shingles vaccine? I read that the vaccine itself is risky and can cause some nasty problems. So there is a very small increased risk of Guillain-Barré syndrome following the Shingrix vaccine. It's an increased risk of 3 people in a million. Before you get too worried about that, I would encourage you to consider that food poisoning from undercooked chicken specifically. Campli, oh my goodness, I can't say that one. Campylobacter jejuni carries a Guillain-Barré syndrome risk of 1,000 in a million. Cases of GBS from vaccination of any kind are extremely rare. So there is a slight increased risk, but it is really, really rare. The most common side effects from the shingles vaccine are redness, pain, tenderness, and swelling at the injection site, and then muscle pain, joint pain, shivers, and headaches. It is actually kind of a nasty one to get. 1 in 5 people report feeling really, really crappy for 2 or 3 days following their shingles vax. And yeah, I don't think we should lie. The side effects from this one can be rough. So get it on a Friday and plan to stay in bed all weekend if you can. But if you have any doubts about the trade-off, I would encourage you to just ask anyone who's ever had shingles, because it is really bad. It's very, very painful, and actually can last. The nerve pain from shingles can last for months or years after the rash itself clears. And that's not even that rare of an outcome. So definitely prevent that if possible. All right, Chana, can you hear us yet? And not. So I'm just going to chat her and start talking.
You can hear me.
Hear her.
This is the weirdest feeling. Okay, I'm talking to no one. So thank you. You asked about the SIDS study. I'm hoping, okay, because this is something that I think is really important to discuss, because it speaks to a very important topic of SIDS, but it also speaks to another important topic of science literacy and making sense of health headlines. But I want to first say that my heart just sinks thinking about anybody who's had to deal with SIDS and had a tragedy in their family. So my heart goes out to you. If that's you, if you're one of the people who's faced this horrible tragedy. So we have to tread very carefully when we talk about any disease, really, because misinformation has real emotional implications and practical implications too. So that's why I got really riled up about the headlines surrounding the SIDS study, because they just weren't accurate. And I wasn't the only one getting riled up. There were actually this SIDS study that hit the news in May. There were actually 2 rounds of headlines. The first round was, hailing a great breakthrough, and the second round was talking about exactly what I said. That it's just not okay to mislead people about and say that we have, we're on the brink of a cure and on diagnostic tests and all that when we're not. So, just stepping back, the study that I mentioned, it was what they actually found was they measured levels of a certain activity of a certain protein in these dried blood spots that you routinely do when you do newborn testing. And they found that the infants who had died, later on, first of all, the blood spots were taken 2 to 3 days after birth. And then some of these infants later died of SIDS, some of them died of other causes, and some of them didn't die. And they compared those groups. And the infants who died from SIDS, they had somewhat lower levels of a certain protein called butyrylcholinesterase. And so that's the big finding, was that there was a statistically significant difference in the levels of activity of this particular protein. But when you look at the numbers in detail, there's a big difference between statistically significant and, statistically significant means it's probably not a random difference, but it doesn't really tell you about the magnitude of difference or just how exactly clean cut the distributions are in the levels. And so in this case, it was actually pretty messy. So if you look at the protein activity levels of this particular, amazing discovery protein, it was an average of 5.6 in the SIDS cases and 7.7 in the Asian sex max controls. So it's not like SIDS cases had 0 and others had hundreds fold more. It was kind of a modest difference. And in addition, there was a lot of overlap in the distribution. So in the SIDS cases, levels of the protein activity varied from 2.9 to 10.8, and in controls, they ranged from 1.7 to 23.3. So when people are talking about using this as a diagnostic test, I'm thinking it does not sound like a very good candidate for a diagnostic marker to me, even though that's kind of the implication of the study. So this by no stretch of the imagination does this mean that they proved cause and effect. right? It's just an interesting avenue for investigation. And even the title of the article in the journal said, butyrylcholinesterase, butyrylcholinesterase is a potential biomarker for sudden infant death syndrome. So potential biomarker is really as strong as the language that's appropriate here. And I think one of the reasons it got attention, and I even heard a fellow parent talking about it on the sidelines at our T-ball, basically telling someone else that they figured it all out and we can now put stuffies back in the beds and not worry about it. And I had to speak up and say, no, that was actually just an interesting discovery. But I think one of the reasons it's sticky is because there's a sort of intriguing mechanism behind it. Like there is actually a way that this could make sense. And they specifically say that they think that lower levels of this particular protein could impair a certain reflex that infants have to wake up in certain stressful environmental situations of low oxygen or so on. And so that in theory, there's a reason this could matter. But it's not the same as proving it. It's just an interesting hypothesis that is plausible. So it's definitely worthy of a further investigation, but we're really not, unfortunately, close to a clear diagnosis or a cure. And unfortunately, this is just one of many examples of where the media misrepresents what the study actually said. And so I just encourage you to always be skeptical of everything that you read, even in reputable mainstream media sources.
Yeah, thanks for that, Chana. And again, we are having some technical difficulties, so I apologize for, thanks for bearing with us on these. So we're going to go straight to the remainder of the speed round here. I covered what's going on with boosters for kids, and I'm going to move next to an update on vaccines for tots. I'm really excited about this news. We are going to hear the results of the vaccine studies for tots, people who are 6 months old through up to age 5 on June 16th. And we expect to see those vaccines approved for that age group basically in 2 weeks. And so we're almost there. The wait is almost over. So that is really exciting news. I know a couple of people asked that in the chat. I'm just telling Chana what's going on. So let's see, another one. Should I wait before I get a booster? We did talk about this before. No, I know in general, you really should not wait until fall or just until some other, benchmark, until cases go back up or something else, until you get a booster. You should get a booster now if you're due for a booster now. It's protection that you have now is better than some kind of theoretical protection that you save for the future. I think when those Omicron specific variant boosters come out, likely lots of people will be eligible for another booster anyway. And so I don't think you're really missing out on anything. In general, you should go get a booster now. Let's see, next speed round question. Jesse in Virginia asked, should healthy kiddos get their 3rd dose now, even if the wave in the fall is expected to be worse? Again, no, they should not wait. Get their dose, their 3rd dose now. The 3rd dose really is the remainder of the important primary series. And so they should go ahead and get that now, get them protected. And that protection is very likely to last them through the fall anyway. So I covered that one from Maureen in Wisconsin. Helen from California, does a thick T test line on your rapid test mean your viral load is heavy? And a thin T line mean low viral load? Yes, in short, that is what that means. Darker lines mean there was more virus on your swab, but don't freak out. Lots of virus is normal when you're sick. That's what being sick is. It's also normal for viral levels to peak after your symptoms have peaked. And I think it's also important to remember that the swab is just a tiny sample of what's going on in your whole body systemically. So swabbing 2 different times could give you very different results depending on just what you happen to pick up on that swab at that time. So again, thanks for bearing with us as we went through these technical challenges today. That is all we have time for today. Thanks so much for joining us. And I know Chana can't hear me, but thank you, Chana, for organizing the lives. We do have a twice weekly newsletter, which you can sign up for on our website, dearpandemic.org. And I know we didn't get to everybody's questions today. We get a ton of questions, and we try to answer them. We use them to plan what we're going to talk about on the page each week and in our lives. So please submit the questions to our question box, which is on our website at a link that I just dropped. And last but not least, I have to say, always seek the advice of your healthcare provider with any questions you have about your own medical condition. And never disregard professional medical advice or delay seeking advice because of something you have heard or seen anywhere on the internet, including right here. So thank you for joining us. And until next time, stay safe and stay well.